Hello, welcome back to the Space School. Look, this is PF's every favorite hangout place. Today we're back with another Star Wars story. When Vader was placed inside the suit, he was told that his wife died. What would have happened had Lord Vader found out about Luke and Leia and then raised them in the ways of the Force? Before we begin the story, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of the Pente production team. If you want a chance to win on our next giveaway, watch the end of the video and I'll tell you all about it. It is a lightsaber, by the way. Our story begins in the medical facilities, a galaxy away from one another. One of the medical achievements of the core, while the other was one of the best medical facilities within 1,000 parsecs in the far reaches of the Outer Rim. One on Coruscant, while the other was on a rock formation called Polis Massa. In the Republic medical facility on Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker was becoming Darth Vader. His skin was burnt to a crisp, and he lost all of his limbs. They were all cut off except for one metallic hand he had to replace the right arm of his arms with when they were cut off by Dooku, 3 years before. Anakin lay in absolute pain. The cold metal of the table and the picking and pulling that the medical droids were doing on his fragile, burned skin was too much pain for even Anakin to endure. Sidious watched from the corner of the room, while Anakin cried out in desperate pain. His thoughts were dead. Only flashes of what had happened to him, the death inside of the temple, inside of the Mustafar facilities, and the loss to his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, on Mustafar. Anakin cried out his name, Obi-Wan, as he wailed in pain, trying to do anything to escape as new metallic limbs were attached to his body. On Polis Massa, the wife of Anakin Skywalker, was in great pain as well, as Obi-Wan used the Force to calm her and relax her as she gave birth to 2 twins. Luke and Leia were their names, as each of the children were born. While the birth of the twins would be healthy, Padme would be dying from unknown reasons. Inside of the medical bay on Coruscant, Vader wasn't going to make it. He was also dying, and while the suit would help him, Sidious knew the perfect lie to put his apprentice under his evil spell, and cement him as his servant. Sidious dwelled on the dark side of the Force, and used his connection to Padme, as he pulled her life essence from her body while she lay on the medical bay table, trying to tell Obi-Wan that there was still good in Anakin. She died, and as she died, across the galaxy the mask was placed on Vader, and his heartbeat returned. Heavy, metallic breathing. Anakin Skywalker was no more. Vader was born, as his medical bay table raised up, and he looked down at his master, who stood next to him. The first words out of his mouth, as he stiffly asked, realizing that he no longer sounded like himself. There was one thing on his mind. He was worried about Padme. He knew she was alive, and he could feel it, but as he asked, Sidious smiled from beneath his robe, as he told Vader that in his anger, he killed her. Vader closed his eyes under the mask. He couldn't have. It was impossible. He felt that she was alive before he fought Obi-Wan. Even worse, there was a tremor through the Force. While Vader lost his limbs, and therefore lost some of his connection to the Force, he was still the most powerful being alive, still the chosen one. And while in this short moment he could feel that Padme was no longer alive, he could feel what this was. Not just one, but 2 children were alive, born somewhere across the galaxy. Vader ripped himself out of the medical bay table that he was leaned up against, and he turned his head over towards Sidious, who could be seen with glowing yellow eyes and yellow teeth that made even Vader real. Vader stepped down as the words rang out through his mind. Even if this was true, he couldn't live with himself. But there was no way that it could be true. Vader felt it. Padme was alive on Mustafar. Vader reached out with a widened hand as he lashed onto Sidious's throat. The Dark Lord was completely caught off guard as Vader turned his evil mask and looked into the eyes of Sidious. The soulless expression on Vader's face put fear into Sidious's heart. He tried to speak as Vader's metallic voice rang over the top of his own. Vader said that Palpatine lied to him. Sidious hesitated as he realized the only way out of this was a failsafe built into Vader's suit. Sidious raised his hands and sent lightning into Vader's suit, trying to put down his little pet. Vader felt the lightning surge through his suit as he tumbled back, keeping a hold of a grip on Palpatine's neck. Rage coursed through his veins as he tightened his metallic grip, as he snapped Sidious's neck, crushing the windpipe of his supposedly new master. As the lightning stopped and Vader tumbled to his knees. His suit became very weak, as he subconsciously realized that Sidious planned on stunning his new apprentice with lightning, making him bow to him and making him completely subservient. Vader gritted his teeth under the mask as he looked down at the dead body of the man who lied to him. Vader reached out his hand to use the Force, and then he realized he was struggling with something that came so naturally to him. Vader reached out further, trying to use the power of the Force, and he felt nothing. He closed his eyes from under the mask as he grabbed a hold of his master's lightsaber and pulled it towards him. The blade bounced back and forth on Sidious's hilt. Vader then pulled the blade of his former master as he ignited the blade, and crimson cascaded across the shadow of Vader. The door behind him opened, and 4 royal guards piled in. They all raised their staves, seeing the Emperor dead on the floor before them. They walked towards Vader, surrounding him, as Vader said that he was their new Emperor now. Vader continued holding the blade, demanding that they pledge themselves to him as their new leader. They remained silent as they stepped forward. Vader moved into a defensive position, realizing how stiff he really was. The royal guards pushed forward, poking and stabbing at him, landing strikes on his recently burned skin as their stabs pierced through the armor of Vader. The newly crowned Dark Lord felt the pain, and he used it to fuel him, as he used a lightsaber to strike at them. Realizing how slow and brutal each and every strike was, feeling how unable he was to be quick and maneuverable as he was as Anakin Skywalker. Vader took a strike to the chest as he fell back, tumbling into the medical bay table where he was built. The royal guards were incredibly well trained, and they were making short work of Vader as he swung down again, missing their staves and bodies, exposing himself once again. The 4 guards stabbed at him, lighting up his suit with electricity. Vader howled in extreme pain as he looked around. He realized how much of a struggle this was going to be. The suit inhibited him. He was humiliated by Obi-Wan, and now he couldn't even beat a non-Force user. Vader swung his blade around in a fury of rage as he tried to kill these 4 guards. The rage throughout him threw him off balance, and when he landed his first strike on a guard, he was surprised. He cut through the guard's legs and the man howled out as Vader grabbed a hold of a man's neck and pulled him around, truly feeling the power and strength that his suit gifted him physically. Vader turned around as he threw the blade of Sidious through the mask of an approaching guard. Vader then turned around as his black robes flipped through the air, and Vader used the Force to pull a 3rd guard towards him as he landed inside of the metallic grip of Vader. The Dark Lord then pulled with the Force the blade out of the other guard's mask, and he turned it around, stabbing through the 4th guard. Vader looked into the terrified faces of the man he was holding on to. Vader twisted his neck and released him as he turned to the injured guard, the last one. Vader raised his blade as he swung down, crushing the spine of the guard instantaneously. Vader breathed heavily as he looked around the room. 5 dead bodies. He felt it through the Force that there was still someone that had the same Force essence as he and Padme had. He knew that this was his child or children, and he knew that they were out there somewhere, and they were now the biggest concern to him. Of course, could Vader care about the Empire? Not really. Of course Vader could, but the most important thing on his mind right now was discovering where his children were. Vader stomped out of the room as he lashed the blade onto his belt. He walked out to the private landing platform to see Sidious' shuttle. While Vader had no idea where to look, he would begin searching the galaxy for his children. Vader thought he knew it would have to be a place close to Mustafar, as the 2 clones on board the shuttle looked at the menacing beast that walked onto their ship, surprising both of them. They asked who he was, as he told them, in a few brief words, behind his menacing voice, that he was their new Emperor. They looked at each other, and then to him, as one clone questioned how that was. Vader, without hesitation, snapped the clone's neck. The other clone raised his blaster to face down Vader, as Vader raised his hand and pulled the clone towards him, igniting his lightsaber and stabbing it through the clone's chest, as he stopped breathing in Vader's arms. Vader threw both of them out of the shuttle, as he checked the database inside of the Emperor's shuttle. He looked closely to what was inside of the database, using any information to discover where the Jedi could have taken his children. He found several medical facilities in the Outer Rim, and then he found the closest of them that were close to Mustafar. This was Polis Massa. Vader prepped the ship to take off as he glided the shuttle into the air and departed the city world of Coruscant. On the other side of the galaxy, both Obi-Wan and Yoda felt change immediately. There was something brewing, but there was also the death of a Sith. They would be wise to assume it was Anakin, but Yoda concentrated. He knew it wasn't. It was something more vile, more evil. Yoda looked at Obi-Wan, and they looked at one another. They knew they had to do something. They could run, or they could stay and fight, because if they didn't, the entire facility would fall into pieces. The Jedi had requested the Naboo Queen to pick up Amidala so that she would be buried on Naboo, where she belonged. But they wouldn't be here all that soon. As for the children, they needed to be taken off-world. Yoda told Obi-Wan that he should go with Bail to Alderaan to train the children. There would be no time for them to split up, and there would be no reason to keep the children separated. Yoda knew that Sidious was gone, and that Anakin was coming here. Though Yoda didn't realize what state Anakin would be in, he knew that whatever Obi-Wan did to him would make him more vile as an opponent. It gave Yoda the opportunity to right the wrongs of the last few days, and the rest of the Clone Wars that preceded Order 66. Vader was homing on to Polis Massa, and Yoda would wait. He was still weak and tired from his duel with Sidious, but he knew he could give his best attempt at this. If he didn't, then it would be a sign of the end of an era. It would mean Kenobi would be the highest-ranking Jedi alive. Obi-Wan wished the Force to be with Master Yoda, as he and Bail took Luke and Leia away from his facility to head towards Alderaan. Yoda told Obi-Wan that he would be there when he was done. Obi-Wan nodded and took the children onto the Tantive 4. They had to be speedy. This dark presence was one to fear. Vader got inside of the ship as Bail ran to the bridge, demanding a liftoff. As Bail left Obi-Wan to look after the twins, Obi-Wan held both of them in his arms, calming them as much as he could. Obi-Wan didn't know what the future held for any of them, but it was worrisome. They could be adopted into a legion of evil, or they could have a chance to exist without pain and suffering like their father had. Obi-Wan could train them in the ways of the Force, but he didn't want to fail them like he did Anakin. The Khazurs flew around his mind, like little parasites eating away at his conscience. Leaving hyperspace was an Imperial shuttle. It was coming to Polis Massa. There would be no identification or reason the Empire would be all the way out here. Even the Republic didn't tread this far out into the galaxy. The ship landed and opened up its ramp. Yoda sat quietly in the medical bay as he felt this presence. Yoda opened his eyes and stood up. He needed to face Vader before he killed or caused any damage to anyone in the facility. One loose end could release everyone into space. Yoda pressed his cane and his old aching body, sore from the battle with Sidious, as he walked out. He rounded the corner to see a machine. This was not a Sith Lord. This was an evil creature. This was not Sidious, nor Anakin Skywalker. The voice spoke up, sending chills down Yoda's spine, as he heard Vader's voice for the first time. Vader demanded to know where his children were. Yoda spoke up, telling Vader that they were not here, and they were not his. Those children belonged to the man known as Anakin Skywalker, and Yoda made sure that Vader knew he was no longer Anakin. If he was Anakin, he would have had his children, and there would be no issue. Vader stepped forward heavily, as Yoda stood his ground. Vader demanded once more that Yoda give over his children. Yoda then cut deeply as he asked Vader if he would kill them in the same way that he killed his wife. Yoda then said that the Council would have granted him clemency if he had been open about his position. Sure, in hindsight, the Jedi might be a little upset given what happened to their order because of Anakin, but Yoda always tried to be understanding with him. Vader growled as he ripped his lightsaber from his belt and looked at Yoda, holding the crimson blade, primed for combat. Yoda looked at Vader and frowned as he pulled his blade with the Force from his belt. Anakin had fallen. There was no chance for redemption. He killed everything that he ever loved, and Yoda was not about to let any more innocent people become victims to his evil power. Yoda and Vader clashed in the middle of the landing bay as green and red cascaded the blinding darkness of space. Their blades shined brighter than the stars as Grandmaster and Jedi Knight fought back and forth. Every chance they stopped in the middle of their duel. Yoda told Anakin about how far he had fallen. Dragging the Sith Lord with dialect meant to hit his heart, only ever referring to Vader as Anakin. Yoda knew that the dark side was evil, but he was trying to show someone who was so clearly lost what that evil did to him. Yoda asked Anakin to think about Ahsoka. The Dark Lord growled and swung violently, trying to cut the little space frog into pieces. Anakin never saw how much Yoda did care for him, and Yoda was still trying to save Anakin before killing him. Yoda knew that there was an inkling of savable Anakin within that husk of metal. Vader continued throwing his lightsaber violently around as Yoda moved quickly, deflecting every strike and avoiding the rest. The Dark Lord was furious, and every time Yoda tried to coax him, he got angrier. Vader then seized advantage as he grabbed Yoda in the air with the Force and threw the Jedi Master across the bay and through a door, shattering glass around Yoda. Vader then stomped his way forward as he walked through the doors to see Yoda wasn't there. Vader screamed out Yoda's name violently, and then he turned his head to see a medical bay with the lights off. He stepped forward and looked. He saw his wife. She was dead before him. Vader growled and fell to his knees as he released a bellowing howl of pain and suffering. He was a victim to the dark side of the Force. He was pained by his own doing, and then he saw Yoda at the edge of the hallway. He told Vader that this was his doing. Vader looked over, tears crawled down his cheeks, aching the newly scarred skin. His lips quivered and his eyes bursted full of pain under the mask. Yoda stood like a shadow in the hallway. Yoda then spoke up, telling Vader that this never needed to happen. She would have been safe. The Jedi would have never harmed her. He then told Vader that he was deceived by a lie, like the rest of the galaxy. Sidious only wanted Anakin for power. Yoda then asked where his new master was. Vader growled as he clenched his fist, feeling every burn scar rip across the inside of his suit. He looked at Yoda and knew he was being honest. But if the Jedi were so good, then why did they belittle him? And why? Did he now look like this if the Jedi were so good, considering it was his Jedi Master that did this to him? Vader grabbed his blade and stood up, facing down Yoda, as he asked the exact same question that clouded his mind. Yoda's eyes watered. For being a Jedi Master, emotionless for almost 900 years, he saw how far the dark side could take somebody. He knew Anakin was lost, but part of him didn't want to give up. Part of him wanted to believe that Anakin was still in there. The Anakin that was meant to bring balance to the Force, not destroy it. Yoda looked at Vader and sighed, as he thought of every instance where the Jedi failed him. And he knew Anakin had every right to betray the Jedi. They failed him. Yoda looked into the soulless eyes of Vader as he apologized. For the first time in several years or decades, Yoda apologized. He failed Vader. He failed the Chosen One. There was a chance for redemption. Before the war ended, Yoda could have taken Anakin with him to destroy the Sith, but he never did. Yoda didn't want it to ever come to this. Vader, still broken from everything that had happened, looked at his wife and then to Yoda. The Jedi Grand Master could see the turning in Anakin's heart. There was still a chance to save him. It was right here and right now. He had no master. He was the only one that could corrupt himself to a life of evil servitude, and the only one that could try and reconcile the galaxy that he turned upside down. Yoda held out his little green hand as he asked Anakin to join him. Vader looked into Yoda's eyes, seeing the true care and peace that he was trying to bring Anakin. Yoda told Anakin that it would be alright. Anakin looked back at Padme to see her lifeless body. Vader then reached his hands up as he pulled the helmet off of his head. He looked down at Master Yoda as he removed both pieces of the helmet. Yoda's face was lit with sadness as he saw the burn scars written up and down Anakin's face. He saw the lava burns and charred skin. He saw ash and even some bone. Anakin was deformed. He was not the same man he once was, as he struggled to breathe for the first time without the mask. The mask fell into the ground as Anakin wavered to his knees. He fell heavily and looked up as tears dried on his cheeks. He felt the pain of the salty tears dry into his wounds. Yoda stepped forward and croaked in his bones as he placed his lightsaber on his belt. Anakin's eyes looked full of pain as he seeped into his own suffering and turmoil. Yoda got within arm's reach of Vader as he told the fallen Chosen One that together they could begin to make things right. Memories coursed through Vader's mind as he remembered everything that happened, facing the Council for the first time, Naboo, nests of Gundarks, the first time he really saw Obi-Wan as a master, being a youngling, Mortis, Ahsoka, Windu, Plo Koon, Kamino, Umbara, Krell, the Clone Wars, top-killing Tiplar, Captain Rex of 501st, Commander Cody, Obi-Wan's message to him before Utapau, the fall of the Republic, the death of the Jedi, murdering the helpless younglings, the girl who he stabbed but felt her presence still alive, Sindralic, the Jedi Temple bombing, killing Dooku, and then he looked back at Yoda and remembered every time that Yoda was there for him. Always listening, always trying to be there for him, always trying to guide him into the light. The times that the Chosen One and the Grand Master of the Jedi Order were together. Yoda was always happy to see Anakin and Ahsoka together. Vader remembered all these times that not Palpatine, he was Sidious, not this mentor trying to make him happy, only trying to bring him down. Anakin looked at Yoda and remembered everything. Yoda smiled gently as he pressed his hand out further, trying to bring the two back into the old days, trying to reconcile the past, even after what Anakin did to the Order. Anakin struggled without his mask to breathe as he realized the true extent of what his injuries would do to him. Vader looked down at Yoda's hand as he reached out with his metallic glove to hold it. He then grabbed a hold of Yoda's neck and pulled him in as he ignited his lightsaber into Yoda's chest. Vader smiled and thanked Yoda. Vader then stood up as he walked over to Padme's bed and kissed her on the forehead, promising her to make things right. Yoda pulled the mask and placed it back on his head as he pulled the metal bed off of its hilts and activated the mechanism that allowed it to hover. Vader then pushed the bed out of the room as he pushed it into the shuttle. Vader stepped on Yoda's corpse as he walked by, crushing the tiny body of the former Jedi Master. Vader then got on board the shuttle and brought it back to Coruscant, where he would take Padme to the medical facility, where he was constructed and built into Vader. Obi-Wan on the other side of the core would be on Alderaan. He felt the death of Yoda, and he knew he was truly alone in this. He sat quietly, meditating in the forest of the planet. He could feel the pain that was coursing through Anakin's body. Vader was inside of the medical facility on Coruscant, watching his dead wife be looked after. They were trying to do anything they could, but it had been multiple hours since she died. Vader paced around back and forth. The bodies of Sidious and the 4 guards were still laying across the floor. Vader looked around as he listened to the droids talk to one another, as they tried to find a way to revive her. Vader left the room as he took the shuttle to the industrial sector of the planet. He was looking for any information regarding the dark side of the Force, and how it could be used to bring Padme back from the dead. Of course, Sidious would be no help, but he remembered the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Unwise, who told his apprentice everything about the Force. Sidious would have never told Vader any of this information, so Vader would have to recover the information however he could. Instead of Sidious's lair, he landed the shuttle and searched around for whatever he could find. There were Sith relics everywhere, but Vader had no knowledge of the dark side. He hadn't been trained remotely in the dark side of the Force. All he knew is what he was taught by the Jedi. There was nothing taught to him by Sidious. All he knew is that he was more powerful whenever he used the dark side of the Force. Vader stumbled through the Sith lair, knocking over everything in sight, looking for information he craved. Vader grabbed a hold of the altar in front of him. He saw smoke emanating from it. As he reached into it trying to summon anything he could, Vader was then thrown across the room, as the Force opened it up, and summoned a beast from the deep reaches of space. It could be felt far and wide from across the Force. Vader would wake up several hours later, as he felt the tremor in the Force. It was unnatural, evil, brutal. Vader stumbled to his feet and searched around. He saw misplaced items. The entire room was torn apart, like a storm tore through and ripped everything off the ground. Vader stumbled out and around as he continued looking for anything to help him save Padme. There were some ancient artifacts, but the chances of Vader learning how to restore Padme to life were very slim. Vader had to do something else to ensure that the decomposition did not begin. So, he would return to the medical facility and request the presence of one of the Imperial admirals. Vader would stand quietly on the outside of the main platform of the medical facility. He would wait until the admiral, by the name of Tarkin, walked out. He didn't know who this was, but Tarkin was accompanied by 2 guardsmen. The 3 looked at this mass staring off into the Coruscant cityscape. Vader turned around and saw Tarkin stutter back. The ice-cold man was even shocked to see this beast staring at him. Tarkin then stood tall as he asked who he was and where the Emperor was. Vader told Tarkin that he was the Emperor. He killed Palpatine, and he was instating himself as a new power in the galaxy. Tarkin pondered for a moment, but the clones, still under Directive Order 66, raised their blasters. Vader looked at them as they were raised from the ground, dropping both their weapons as they gasped for air. Vader looked at Tarkin blankly. He realized that both men were being choked to death. Tarkin demanded that he release them. The men begged for their release. Vader told Tarkin that they would negotiate a deal. Vader dropped the men as they fell to their knees. The clone on the right reached for his blaster as Vader whipped him off the platform as he screamed, crying out for help, as he tumbled down to his death. Tarkin asked for a name. Vader said that he was Vader. Tarkin nodded. He knew of this Lord Vader. Tarkin was close to the Emperor, and Vader was already on his radar, so Tarkin asked his new master what he would like for him to do. Vader told Tarkin that he was to become the new face of the Empire, but answered directly to him. Tarkin nodded. Vader then told Tarkin that the Empire would be run by him, and he would be the face of said Empire, but he would answer only to Vader. Tarkin asked if he could do anything he wanted. Vader said that he could, as long as they didn't follow Palpatine's original plans. Tarkin nodded as he bowed to Vader, and then demanded that his last guard follow him. Vader turned around and watched as a storm crept over the city, covering up skyscrapers, the Senate building, and the skeleton of the Jedi Temple. Vader thought quietly, and then he requested that the medical droids place Padme in a Bacta tank and move her to the industrial sector, where Vader would construct his lair. It would be in the remnants of the Sith lair Sidious had constructed years before. For the next 2 years, Vader would search tirelessly for his children, and for a way to bring Padme back from the dead. There were hundreds of Jedi out and about, and they threatened the Empire, but the message left behind by Obi-Wan Kenobi pushed them out into the far reaches of space, into hiding. Though there were instances of Jedi that were rare. With the Emperor and Yoda being gone, the Jedi were confused. There were no inquisitorious. Vader killed anyone who tried to beg for his mercy. Vader was reserved on finding information. He traveled far and wide, to Crais II, Exegol, and eventually to Korriban. While in Korriban, Vader would find plenty of information that he'd be able to use. But while he was there, he noticed open tombs, with their contents raided. It seemed as if pirates arrived on the planet to see what they could scavenge. Lightsabers went for high prices, and he assumed that's what it was. While Vader cemented himself into darkness, his children were on the other side of the core, while they were being trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi and raised by Bail Organa and his wife. Though the Empire was reorganized greatly, because Vader requested Tarkin not to use Palpatine's plan, he built a cabinet that orchestrated a much stricter government, with much more effective militaristic force. While Palpatine would have had the clone army removed, Tarkin had the Kaminoans remove the accelerated growth gene, and he would also instate the clones as a permanent member of the Galactic Empire. It was costly, sure, but Tarkin understood that the Empire needed to be maintained, and rebels like Saw Gerrera out and about needed to be killed before causing public disarray. There was also so much that needed to be done, and Tarkin had to act fast. He needed to be as useful as ever in the eyes of Vader, because if Vader could kill his master, what would stop him from killing anyone else? Vader was silent most of the time, rarely seen, distant, hyper-focused. While Vader did keep his clones and was allowed to ravage through whichever civilization he pleased, Tarkin kept a tight leash on that, because Tarkin targeted politicians rather than societies. Anyone that worked against him would mysteriously disappear. Vader never had to get called in, until Tarkin sent some men to take out Bail Organa on the peaceful world of Alderaan. Tarkin sent an elite unit of clones there to dispatch the Alderaanian senator, and have a new one put in place. This group of clones were Imperial Commandos, their name, Delta Squad, and they had experience with replacing senators with Imperial loyalists. They had done it on other planets such as Corellia. While this was very much so below the talent of the squad, this squad of 3 was dedicated to the Empire. It was their mandate, and while they didn't have their 4th member, presumed dead on Kashyyyk, the 3 were determined to find him. They wouldn't have the chance though when they faced down Obi-Wan Kenobi on Alderaan, and were killed. The lightsaber wounds left on the clones would indicate that the senator from Alderaan was protecting a Jedi. Not only that, but if the news got out that Tarkin was hunting down senators with Imperial commandos, the Senate would disperse into chaos. Vader would be sent to Alderaan to discover this Jedi and have him killed. Vader, once he arrived, would enter the residence of Bail Organa and discover the bodies of Delta Squad. On top of that, he found 2 kids' rooms. This was oddly peculiar because Vader couldn't remember Bail ever mentioning having kids before. This was something to procure for Tarkin. Vader carried on searching around looking for answers, spending hours inside of the house looking for any clues or context, but he found nothing. Vader would eventually return to Coruscant and ask Tarkin about Bail Organa's family life. Tarkin told Vader that it was just him and his wife. Vader growled. He told Tarkin that Bail Organa was an enemy of the Empire, harboring a Jedi and his children. Tarkin nodded as Vader stormed out of the room. Meanwhile, the group of 5 ran away from the public eye. Obi-Wan had been training the children, and they had been accepting the ways of the Force really well. Luke and Leia were growing exceptionally within the Force, but there was also much time until they would be ready to put any type of threat to their father. Kenobi tried as hard as he could to train them, but he also knew he couldn't force them to do anything more than they were doing at the moment. Regardless, Obi-Wan and the rest of the group went out across the galaxy, using the private shuttle of the Organas to make home across the Empire. They had to stop frequently and stay shortly. It was a life on the run, with some of the most recognizable faces across the Empire. The leader of our planet, the senator of his planet, and one of the few remaining members of his order. Vader was hot in their trail though. Venators were deployed across the galaxy, looking for these escapees. Vader traveled to the Outer Rim, assuming that would be where they went in hiding, across the Empire where it was weak. Though Tarkin had plans to change that with the clone armies, but for now he let the Hutt Syndicate and Crimson Dawn rule the Outer Rim. Vader traveled deep. He found himself on Ryloth, Tatooine, Othawai. But the ones he was looking for, there was also something plaguing Vader. He didn't know what it was, but he assumed that it was whatever reason came out of Sidious's altar when he messed around with it 2 years prior. Regardless, Vader sat in his meditative state, thinking about his children, and of course Padme too. Vader was so broken, he spent the last 2 years confined to himself and to his mind. He faced so much anger, pain, suffering, and everything else because of a lie he believed. While he wished for a better life, and maybe even wished he took Yoda's hand back on Polis Massa, that life was behind him. His choices were gone. Vader thought of everything. He had the opportunity to take his children back, and even more, find the key to immortality. That same key that Sidious promised him when he was just Anakin Skywalker. Vader then got a feeling through the Force. He was near, but there was one issue. Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi was also near. Vader was partially afraid of facing his former master. Kenobi had been more active than Vader in terms of training. Vader hadn't been using the Force or his lightsaber for the most of the past 2 years. While he had grown in the Force, he was just simply using it to bring his wife back from the dead. Vader was extremely cut off from the Force because of the missing limbs, but it didn't deter him from finding the answers to saving his wife. Vader took his Venator-class Star Destroyer to a planet where he felt an especially strong connection. It was an ice world. The planet was Renvar. It was far away from most of the galaxy, and the chances of the Empire finding them was slim, until Imperial gunships rained down from the sky. Vader and the 501st arrived as the men ran out of their gunships, followed closely by Lord Vader. He told them that they could kill anyone except for the children. The men had their orders, and they searched far and wide. There was a massive temple, and the men went inside. Vader followed closely. Vader's breathing echoed throughout the cavern, as the five realized that they had been caught. The clones turned on their night vision and aimed their weapons. Vader then ignited his blade as he turned around and blocked Kenobi's attack. The clones kept pushing forward as they let Vader fight his fight. Vader and Kenobi got into a heated battle, as Obi-Wan came to realize that this was not Anakin, but a truly dark creation. The two would bounce back and forth, realizing what had become of the other. The clones turned the corner and surrounded Bail Organa and his wife, as they all pointed their blasters and executed them on sight. The clones took the children, as Obi-Wan could be heard crying out for the children. Vader took advantage of this, as he pulled Obi-Wan with the Force and threw him through a wall of ice, and then buried his former master under said ice. The clones brought Vader the children, as he asked them to be put inside the shuttle. Vader said some final remarks to his master before turning and leaving the planet with his two children. Both of them, being so young, could either remember this or forget it. There were chances of 50-50 that the children would remember this. Vader was banking on the fact that they wouldn't. Vader would have the children taken back to Coruscant, where he would raise them himself. Tarkin would insert a new senator for the Alderaanian role. Tarkin would also establish a legacy of Imperial rule, as Vader returned to radio silence. On Coruscant, inside the industrial sector, Vader would bring his children and begin raising them. Vader had a lot to unravel, but it was obvious that they knew the Force. Vader was overwhelmed with love for his children, but he made sure that they couldn't see their mother. Vader was going to bring Padme back to life, but for now, he needed the children to stay away from her. Vader had one tragic task to do. That was to reveal himself to his children, to unveil his mask and show his children his true face. They would love him, or they would reject him for being so deformed. Vader's children didn't understand what was going on, but they were so distraught off of everything they had just been put through. The constant movement because of running away from the Empire led them to be extremely emotionally distraught. Vader was scary to them, but his familiar essence within the Force calmed their uneasy hearts. Vader knew that the children would be distraught not because of him, but because of what they had just gone through. The children reacted really well to seeing Vader's face for the first time. He was very scarred, but the children walked up. When they both touched his face, the scarring dissipated, and his skin under their little hands healed. They were incredibly powerful, but this usage of the Force drained them from their strength. Both children took some rest and fell asleep. Vader's heart filled with joy. He didn't know how he could live without these children. On Renvar, Kenobi broke out of his ice cavern. He was trapped for too long. He kept himself warm though, but he needed to get back to the children. As Obi-Wan ran out to the ship, he realized that the ship was destroyed. Obi-Wan was stuck on Renvar. If he didn't find a way off-world, he would freeze to death. Vader knew that Obi-Wan was alive, but he wanted him to suffer all alone, just like he had to on Mustafar. But Vader knew that letting Obi-Wan freeze to death, knowing that he failed, would be victory that would let Vader sleep better at night. Vader would spend time with the children concurrently. There was nothing that made him happier than being with his children. It motivated Vader more than trying to find them did. He raised them as he would have if Padme was with them. Vader watched their growth closely as they trained on the open balcony over the cityscape that was long abandoned. The industrial sector was quiet, and Vader would instruct his children in the ways of the Force. They were powerful, just like their father. Vader was proud of them, even in their young age. Because of the children, he was inspired to reconstruct his suit and find a way to also heal himself so that he could look like their natural father. the man that once was gone by the name of Anakin Skywalker. Anakin tried his best to be there for his children, as the first few months turned into several years. Luke and Leia would eventually become 5 years old after this time. Vader was still the ruler of the Empire, but the reign of Tarkin was unstoppable. The Empire grew to a peak level of strength, with new Imperial Star Destroyers ruling the space around troublesome planets. While Tarkin wasn't a politician, he was a military leader, and he ruled the Empire like a military leader would. Vader, on the other hand, was able to reconstruct his suit. It was more nimble, though it did resemble the beast that Sidious had constructed. Luke and Leia had a great level of appreciation for their father. While he was odd-looking, he still was their father, and they loved him as such. Vader found more balance within himself, and as for Padme, he found the right spell to revive her. Though it wasn't a dark side ability, it was a balanced ability, and he found it on Dathomir. The ability was once used by the Night Sisters and by Mother Talzin. As Vader used the Force, he conjured to life his dead wife, as she woke up in the Bacta tank. She missed 5 years of life, and in a way, she and Anakin were now the same age. She looked at him. She didn't recognize him. She was scared of him. Vader was not Anakin. Even with the mask removed, the scarred, damaged face was so surprising to her. Padme reached up and touched her husband's face. Anakin's eyes melted into tears as they fell onto her soft hands. She was as gentle as she was 5 years before she died. Anakin told her he did everything he could to save her. But Padme's memory was blurry. Most of the final days of the Clone Wars were gone from her mind. She didn't remember Order 66, the fall of the Republic, or Mustafar. She looked at Anakin and asked what happened to him, though she hardly recognized him after she understood that it was truly him. Anakin held her hand with his metallic glove. Anakin told Padme that they had their children. He'd raised them while she was gone. Padme was extremely confused. She didn't understand what all was happening. Luke and Leia then ran into the room. They saw their mother for the first time and cautiously approached her. They were extremely confused. They had never met her before, but she looked just like them, and she, through the Force, felt very familiar to them. Padme was confused, but she welcomed the change with Anakin, as she welcomed the children too. Across the galaxy, Obi-Wan had escaped the planet of Renvar, and found refuge on Dantooine. He tried to recruit the Jedi Order. He had a group of Padawans with him, including Kyle Katarn, Nari, Cal Kestis, and Kanan Jarrus, otherwise known as Caleb Doom. The Jedi were rebuilding here. Obi-Wan was the highest-ranking Jedi alive that he knew of. While Eth Koth, Shaak Ti, and Coleman Kajak were somewhere out in the galaxy, Obi-Wan didn't have time to find them. Though there was one issue, Kenobi felt a tremor in the Force, and it wasn't Vader. It was something much, much more evil. It had been drifting across the galaxy, and having been released from Korriban, this vile being drifted into the Jedi Temple, where Obi-Wan and his students were, and it killed every single one of them, without lifting a finger or igniting a lightsaber. This being was truly powerful. It left the bodies of the dead behind, after clearing every soul, and leaving for the next target, the most powerful being in the galaxy, the Chosen One. On Coruscant, Vader was able to bring Padme back up to speed, and introduce her to all the new changes in the galaxy. She was beginning to remember everything that happened. She remembered the fall of the Jedi, the rise of the Empire, and the events on Mustafar, and even giving birth to her 2 children, before everything went dark. She wasn't fond of Vader, and she made him aware that she was very upset with him. Of course, Vader had the opportunity to change everything inside the Empire, but by this point, Tarkin's influence was galaxy-wide. The Empire destroyed the Hutts and the Crimson Dawn. They killed Maul, and they killed Jabba. The crime families were cowering away. Tarkin had no time for them, and the clones got rid of them with little to no casualties. And because of Vader's influence over Tarkin, slavery was also abolished from the galaxy. While these points were very positive, Padme did not stand for authoritarian regimes. She wanted the Republic, not an empire. Anakin took this to the heart, and returned to Tarkin and informed him that he should change the Empire into a Republic. Tarkin wasn't all that fond of this. He spent the last 5 years of his life making this, and it would all be completely undone within weeks. Tarkin obeyed his orders though, and he reformed the Imperial Senate into a republic, where people could vote for a leader. Though on the bright side, Tarkin did clean up the galaxy. He made it better, and the Republic would be able to return without having to deal with it. The Chancellor role would return, but it would also be a very limited role, with a select amount of power, with the inability to grow to the power that Palpatine had at the height of the Clone Wars. Padme told Anakin that he needed to work his way back. Anakin loved his wife, and he was willing to do anything he could to earn back Padme's love after force choking her on Mustafar. Anakin worked hard as he stayed true to being a good father and a good husband. Padme loved Anakin for being a good father and raising their children, but for her, the change was a little much. She decided she would give it some time, and some time would pass. 3 more years would go by as the Empire reformed into a republic. The evil forces were churning in the galaxy. Padme was able to find her place in her heart for Anakin once again, but there was a bit of mistrust for her husband. Anakin was able to help reform the Republic, as Padme avoided politics in the galaxy. They moved back to Naboo, where they would raise their children. Vader was also able to strip his suit and change some features around to become less brooding, but his children still loved him, and regardless of all the tension between their parents, Luke and Leia loved both of their parents equally, and were very respectful to both of them. Luke and Leia were also highly trained in the Force, though there was something they felt disturbing. Anakin had been having nightmares of a mask, a face he couldn't see behind a mask. This presence in the Force would finally uncover the location of the Chosen One. The cloud of evil made its way to Naboo, where it would find the children of Skywalker. They were playing on a hill when they were approached by a hooded figure with flowing black robes. The children were scared, and when their screams were heard, Anakin and Padme ran up the hill to find the children laying on their backs. There was a red light pulling from their bodies as it stopped when the hooded man turned to see the attention of the Chosen One. Padme ran over and grabbed the children. They were still breathing, but they had to be taken care of. Anakin stood between his children and wife and this creature. And then fear wrote itself across Anakin's face as he realized the beast who stood before him. The name was the Lord of Hunger, Darth Nihilus. Anakin stood between his children and Nihilus as he told Padme to take the children back inside. She grabbed Luke and Leia and ran back towards the house with the 2 of them in her arms. Anakin asked how Nihilus returned, and the Lord of Hunger told Anakin that he summoned him. By messing with the rituals of the Force, he awoke him from the dead and created a hole in the Force, bringing Nihilus back to life. After all, Nihilus was a wound in the Force. Anakin stood his ground as Nihilus stood proud and strong. He was not fearful of Anakin. This was a broken man, defeated by a mere Jedi. Anakin and Nihilus looked at each other as they prepared for a duel of Force powers. This would not be a contest of the lightsaber. Nihilus outstretched his arms as he tried to drain Anakin, but the Chosen One used the Force to take any of the power away from Nihilus as he threw the Lord of Hunger back and away from him. The wound in the Force toppled back as Anakin stepped forward, his feet heavy as he grounded himself, not afraid of this Lord Nihilus. Luke and Leia watched from below as Anakin walked towards Nihilus, trying to remember anything he could about sealing a wound in the Force. If Anakin didn't stop Nihilus, he would consume the entire galaxy and eat it all. Anakin was not Vader. He had his regrets, and he felt bad for what happened 8 years before. The Jedi didn't deserve to die for this happiness that he felt, but he felt that the path was complete, and he had to continue following it. Anakin stood above Nihilus as the wind blew through his hair. He looked at Nihilus stammer to his feet as he rushed Anakin with the Force. Anakin danced around as he pulled Nihilus back into his hands. Anakin looked down at his family and smiled. He twisted Nihilus around as he lifted the Lord of Hunger into the sky. Nihilus screeched out as he tried to use the Force to drain the world of Naboo from life. He'd eaten a planet before, but this was something he had to do now. If he wanted to survive this encounter with Anakin, he had to eat the planet out from under him. And then, before Nihilus could finish planning this fall of Skywalker, he watched the Chosen One harness the power of the Force in front of him, opening 2 black holes side by side, surrounding Nihilus. Anakin grinned as he watched Nihilus get pulled apart by the black holes. The world of Naboo began swinging and blowing as trees and water began getting sucked in. Anakin knew how deadly this was, but he had to do it, in order to bring an end to this beast within the Force. The fabric of Nihilus was torn apart as Anakin closed the 2 black holes after Nihilus disappeared. The wind stopped blowing, and the trees and water relaxed. Anakin fell on his back. He was very weak from this encounter with the Lord of Hunger. There was very little he could do to avoid having to take this route. Anakin looked up in the sky as the birds returned and the sun came back over the shadow of what used to be darkness. He took shallow breaths. His children and wife came running up the hill. He smiled at them again as he asked them if everything was okay with them. And then they asked if he was okay. Anakin told them that he would do anything for their safety, as his eyes rolled back and he drifted away. Padme shook Anakin and checked his pulse. He was still alive. but the power to open up the black holes felt unreal. It knocked him out. They collectively brought him back inside. Anakin eventually awoke. He was very confused. From a nightmare, he walked onto the patio and looked out into the sea. The sun was rising. It was silent. Anakin felt like a young man again. He had hair on his head and a loose-fitting shirt. He didn't look down, but his hands felt real. In fact, all of his ligaments looked real. Anakin closed his eyes as he meditated quietly. The Force felt alive, as if the Jedi Order was still in power, and no war had ever befallen the Republic. It felt unreal, like a nightmare of sorts. Anakin looked down as he saw his hands. As hands, not metal. Anakin felt his chest. There was no breathing apparatus. Anakin's breath picked up. Was it all a dream? 8 years of life a dream? Anakin panicked as he looked around and then down to his hands. He saw a ring, and then he heard a little voice call him by the name Dad. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Troy, Benjamin Wells, Jay Hoffman, Ward Pigman 308, Icy Raptor, Gore, and Chainsaw Inspired for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes on this video so that we can see, I don't know what the next video is, but we'll find out in the next coming days. And if you want to see what if, let me know down below. Or read all the comments about doing crossovers. Check out the Twitch community, Discord, and Patreon to be part of the community for other ways. And if you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, I'm giving away 3 for 50,000 subscribers, so you better smash that like button. Go down below, there's a doc list on the pinned comment. Every comment section has a pinned comment. Write your name on the doc. I will accept all the names, and giveaway will happen whenever we hit 50,000 subscribers. 3 different lightsabers will be given away. And let's talk about a story. Wow. Okay, so I'm still kind of trying to figure out how I feel about this, and I'm sure you're trying to figure out how you feel about it as well. The ending is a cliffhanger, and honestly, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do something different. Usually in the end of the story, I talk about everything that happens, and I kind of wanted to have an interesting moment at the end of this. Now, is it going to be received well? Well, I don't know. Will it? You tell me. But I wanted this story to be different. Obviously, I could have taken the route where they trained and he didn't kill Sidious, but I've done that before. Okay, there's 2 hours worth of videos out there that I've already done that are all about how Vader raises Luke or Vader raises Leia, and I didn't want to do that again because I always strive to be different here, and that's something that's not easy to do. It's very hard to do that when you've done this story before, essentially. You know, I've had Vader train Luke and Leia before, but individually, right? In one of those stories, Leia was completely raised by Yoda and Obi-Wan. In another story, she was completely raised by Vader. And I didn't want it to be that. I wanted this to be different. Of course, yeah, Luke and Leia would probably grow up to be incredible Force users. And yeah, that they would have been incredible, but they would have been balanced. And I think that's the true heart of the story, is that while Vader was still Vader, if he realized that they were still alive, and I thought that was something interesting that I could play with here, and I tried to make as much fun of it as I could. Not fun of it, but, you know, make fun, like, have fun with it, essentially. But if Vader felt that their presences were alive, I mean, they're very powerful. I mean, you'd have to imagine that Luke and Leia together would be just as powerful as Vader, if not more powerful. You would think he would feel that. You know, the galaxy's in disarray, and there's this light surge from across the galaxy. They've been born. Padme died already. They've been born. They're alive, right? He would, if he felt that they were alive, and he killed Sidious, I very much so think this is plausible. I mean, it's a bit of a long shot. Sure, every what if is a long shot, but that's why we call them Star Wars what ifs. Not actually in canon this happened. It's no. This is a what if. This is a what if. We're talking about a what if here, not a canon story. This is very much so a what if, and it follows those lines of a what if this happened. And I think that given the chance that Anakin kills Palpatine, and, you know, immediately off the bat kills Palpatine, the galaxy's gonna go in disarray immediately. So he has to put in a figure. Tarkin is that figure. You know, the first 20-30 minutes of the story are like the first 24 hours after Vader becomes Vader, right? He goes to Polis Mos, he has a fight with Yoda. By the way, that was really tragic. That was dark. Even for me, that was dark. Actually, no, it's not even dark for me, but you know what I'm talking about. That was something else. But, you know, the truth is I wanted something special here. I didn't want it to feel like the other stories I told. The other stories were very much so focused on Vader training his children and bringing them up to his level and da-da-da-da-da. You've seen that before. If you haven't, you can go watch them. They're on the channel. But if you have, you want something different. You don't want the same story. You've already seen that story before. I want to throw you for a loop. And I wanted to create a loop by having Vader accidentally summon Nihilus, because who else is better to summon than a literal wound in the Force? And I wanted that to be the case. Instead of him summoning, Malgus or Kreia or I don't give a crap who, but instead of summoning that, summoning a wound in the Force by messing around with this dark portal, with this dark essence that Sidious had control over, accidentally summoning this wound in the Force, not just a regular being, but a wound, something that is not supposed to be there, something that hurts the Force. And I think Nihilus would just be on a buffet spree, honestly. He'd probably move on from Korriban and start eating people, probably not entire planets, but just going around to towns, ravaging towns, kind of like the Maul Savage thing that happened in the Clone Wars. And I think that would kind of be what he would be doing. I think he'd just be having a blast, eating everything, buffet on the house, and eventually he'd run into Jedi. I think he would have no issue killing Obi-Wan and those few Jedi. Sorry to Kyle fans and Caleb fans and Cal Kestis fans and Nari fans from people that like that one guy that showed up for like 30 seconds in the Kenobi show. But, I thought this would be interesting if I followed a different route. I didn't want it to be what you expect it to be, and that's always the point. And I think Anakin ending Nihilus by opening 2 black holes is kind of funny. But at the end of the story, this is where most of the questions are going to come from. What happened? Well, he restored balance. That's what it is. He restored balance to the galaxy. There was no more darkness. There was no more Jedi or Sith. It was just balance. Luke and Leia were balanced. He would train them to be balanced. But Anakin woke up, and just like Luke having all those hands and ligaments replaced, but looking like they were human, that's what happened to Anakin. But he woke up and it felt like he was in episode 2. He walked out and he tried to meditate and he felt peace. And that's what happened here. Now, of course, he didn't feel peace when he was out there, but Padme's presence was soothing. And it was kind of like that, where her presence was soothing. And at the end of the day, everything turned out for him. Yeah, sure, he kind of brutalized Yoda. That was kind of messed up. But he's happy. He gets his happy ending 8 years after destroying the galaxy. Anyways, though, I hope you all enjoy this. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so we can hit that 50,000 subscribers and I can give away 3 lightsabers to 3 lucky people. Anyways, though, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.